probably you. It's probably you.
All right,
All right.
I'm
We have the
ready. Let's
judges.
start
Okay, great,
this.
great, great, great. We can start this. Let's go. All right. So we have Hierophant and Joey Rivers debating on the topic, on the proposition Jesus Christ resurrected, um, which Hierophant affirms and Joey Rivers denies. So we'll start with the opening. Hierophant, we'll start your timer whenever you say your first word.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I affirm that the resurrection of Jesus Christ is not merely an article of faith, nor merely a historical claim. It is an ontological necessity demanded by the very structure of reality itself. Imagine a world where good and evil, justice and injustice were locked in a perpetual stalemate. No victory, no resolution, no hope of coherence. My argument tonight is this. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the one event that breaks that stalemate. It is not an accident of history. It is a metaphysical inevitability. The theology I hold to begins with two that cannot be denied. First, necessity. There must exist which cannot not be. We identify this as the necessary. Without it, nothing persists. Just as mathematics collapses without the number one, reality collapses without necessity. The second is disjunction. Every contingent thing that exists as this rather than that. To be is always to be against alternatives. You know, the very fact that you are the way that you are and not someone else is disjunction at work. Now, when disjunction reaches its apex, betrayal, violence, injustice, suffering, and death, we call that maximal disjunction. It is the fracture of being itself. And what sustains being is resonance, alignment with the necessary. Where fracture reigns, resonance must restore. Think of a musical chord. One note drifts off key. Harmony is broken. Resonance restores coherence. So here is the claim. If the necessary, God, enters contingency as what we in Christianity identify as the logos, he must confront maximal disjunction itself. If he did not, contingency would harbor a fracture greater than necessity could heal. That is impossible. Therefore, the resurrection is not optional. It is demanded by ontology itself. But why the crucifixion? Why not something like a simple, natural death? Because crucifixion is not mere mortality. It is death concentrated. Crucifixion is infused with betrayal, injustice, humiliation, abandonment, and violence. It is maximal fracture in historical form. A natural death is the quiet terminus of life. Crucifixion, on the other hand, is the collision of all fractures at once, be it political corruption, religious hypocrisy, human cruelty, even mortality itself. It is the deepest abyss contingency could produce. Only by entering that abyss could the Logos prove that no fracture is beyond restoration. So here is the logic. The necessary cannot be overcome by contingency. Maximal disjunction is equivocated to death with injustice. If the Logos instantiates in contingency, he must overcome maximal disjunction. Crucifixion is maximal disjunction in history. Therefore, resurrection is inevitable. The resurrection is the only outcome consistent with the nature of the necessary. Without it, reality itself collapses into incoherence. But you may ask, what of evil today? If the resurrection defeated maximal fracture, why does evil still endure? Well, the resurrection is not the end of all disjunction, but its ontological defeat. Imagine if overnight the law of gravity reversed itself. Well, reality itself would have changed instantly, but its effects would play out gradually. Eventually, buildings would collapse, oceans would shift, and the world would reorder itself over time. So is it with the resurrection. It is the changing of a fundamental law of contingency itself. The decisive shift has occurred, evil has lost its grounding, but the effects unfold across history. And so evil remains, but only as an already defeated enemy. Now, I want you to notice I have not begun my argument with historical evidence. History confirms, but it does not ground. The resurrection must be true, or else reality cannot hold. Historical testimony persuades precisely because it aligns with metaphysical necessity. We believe the reports because they testify to what must be. And so the resurrection is not improbable, it is necessary. If Christ is not risen, then reality itself cannot cohere. But reality does cohere. Therefore, Christ is risen. The resurrection is the hinge of reality, the metaphysical guarantee that no fracture is beyond repair. It's the down payment of coherence, the assurance of its final fulfillment. The resurrection is not merely an event in history. It is the axis of being itself. Without it, nothing makes sense. But with it, all things hold together. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so that concludes Hierophant's opener.
For your candor.
Now we have Joey. We'll start your timer whenever you say your first word.
All right, thank you. First, I want to begin by reminding the audience and those who don't know me that I am not an atheist, nor do I reject the possibility of miracles. I've said before, I consider existence itself to be the greatest miracle of all. That anything exists to me is truly extraordinary. And so because of this, I remain open-minded to the possibility of not just miracles, but perhaps of a creator or first mover of sorts. You can say I'm an agnostic, or you can even call me a deist. I'm fine with that. Just note, I'm comfortable sitting on the fence about these kinds of things. But let me stress, this is as far as I'm willing to go in meeting my opponent halfway. Yes, perhaps there is a creator that might exist. Yes, such a being may have the power to intervene in supernatural ways, but that's it. To get me to go any further, my opponent must show not that just that the resurrection had to happen necessarily, but that it actually happened historically. And that's the key. Philosophy alone won't settle this. The question, did the resurrection happen, is primarily a historical question, which means we should use the historical method and probability grounded in priors to decide what is most likely that happened. With that said, I don't believe the resurrection is the most probable explanation, and there are several reasons for this that I hope to get into, including, first, problems with how and when the New Testament was written, detailing events leading up to the resurrection. Second, the lack of first-hand eyewitness accounts. Third, the way theological motives shape the Gospels more than historical accuracy. Fourth, the unreliability of the Bible as a consistent source of truth. And lastly, that there are better naturalistic explanations to why people think Jesus did resurrect through visions and what I call, or perhaps some people have heard of, the minimal witness hypothesis, which explains the rise of Christianity without requiring a literal resurrection. Now, these things aren't necessarily all in order. You'll find that I'll touch on each thing as I talk in different places. But the first thing I want to talk about is the way the Gospels were written and everything was recorded and the theological motives that came with them. So Jesus was executed somewhere between 30 and 36 CE. And yet not a single historian, Roman record, or outside letter from that time mention his claimed miracles or the resurrection. Nothing. The person to write about Jesus was Paul around the year 50, nearly 20 years after the supposed events of Jesus' ministry. Well, not even 20, a little less than that. But Paul wasn't an eyewitness. He never met Jesus during his lifetime. He only claimed to have had a vision of him after his death. And then he wrote letters about that experience. Fast forward another 20 years to about 70, and we finally get to the first gospel, Mark. And now, again, Mark himself was not an eyewitness of the resurrection, though later tradition does tie him loosely to Peter. And what's striking is that the earliest manuscripts of Mark don't include any post-resurrection appearances at all. The women flee the tomb in fear, and that's where it ends. Another decade later, Matthew and Luke write their Gospels between 80 and 85, and by this point the stories are becoming far more dramatic. Longer speeches, the angels at the tomb, and elaborate stories like Herod the Great slaughtering innocent newborn babies to kill the infant Messiah. But here's the problem. No one else records this. Josephus, who wrote extensively about Herod as a ruthless ruler, never mentions it. Later in Matthew, we even read that the dead rose from their graves and greeted people in Jerusalem. Was this meant literally, metaphorically, or symbolically? It depends who you ask. Scholars still argue, but either way, it looks less like sober history and more like theology being written. Biblical scholar R.T. France even admits that the account of Herod's massacre and the flight to Egypt is not mere history, but a theological narrative, that Matthew wanted to cast Jesus as a new Moses, fulfilling the old covenant with a new one. And by the time we get to John, which is after the year 90, the story has grown even more. Jesus is raising Lazarus from the dead, delivering long speeches where he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," and appearing dramatically after the resurrection to the doubting Thomas. And what does this show? Well, it shows a pattern. The pattern's clear that the further from the event we get, the more miraculous and theologically rich the stories become. And that's exactly what seems to fit the theological agenda. Matthew as a new Moses, John as the eternal Logos, Luke as the perfect fulfillment of prophecies, and it doesn't read like history, does it? It reads like a growing legend or a long game of telephone. And so no matter how you look at it, the original source and claims where the resurrection happened comes from a very flawed book that doesn't prioritize historical accuracy. Second is what I call the minimal, it's not even my thing, it's just called the minimal witness hypothesis. So what explains the rise of Christianity if not an actual resurrection? This is where the minimal witness hypothesis comes in. It doesn't take dozens or hundreds of eyewitnesses to explain why people came to believe Jesus rose. All it takes is one or two key people, we could say it's Peter, we could say it's Mary Magdalene, to say they had a vision of such. Now remember, Paul himself had a vision, so you can't say that this is far-fetched, that it's only a vision. No, if you think it was a bodily resurrection, I don't know what evidence you can provide to demonstrate this besides, again, the unreliable Gospels themselves. But it seems like if Paul can have a vision, why couldn't whoever the earliest people who claim to have seen this have visions as well? The New Testament, again, is like an unreliable source of truth. And I like to give analogies all the time. So to illustrate this, I like to give the following example. Imagine there's a person in your everyday life who sometimes tells you things that are true, sometimes tells you things that are false, and sometimes tells you things that you can never be certain of or verify. They make wild claims and tell far-fetched stories that sometimes seem to carry with them a sense that this person is very intentional and crafty in how they word or order things. Would you trust this person with your life? Most people will agree that they would not and are justified in distrusting this person. I then ask you to apply the same principle of consistency to the Bible and the historical claims made in the New Testament. If the Bible contains within it some things that are true, some things that are false, and some things that we can't be certain of, am I not justified in not trusting it with my life? And so I'll conclude with this. Let's take a step back with what I've said. Why is the resurrection not a plausible historical event? Because although miracles may not be impossible, and a creator God might exist, this event is better explained through naturalistic causes like the minimal witness theory lays out. The resurrection is not probable because the original source of the claim, the New Testament and Gospels, do not prioritize telling accurate history to events leading up to the supposed event or afterwards. The embellishment over time by second-hand sources who weren't even there over decades after the supposed event is very telling, and therefore the resurrection of Jesus probably did not happen. The rise of Christianity is better explained by human experience, belief, and legendary growth, not by a supernatural event. Thank you.
All right, and that concludes the openers. We begin the cross-examination with Heirophant. We'll start your timer whenever you say your first word.
Joey, thank you for such a wonderful opening. You asked a lot of questions, and I'm not going to have time to address all of them, but I'm going to do my best. So just laying that out. You did say that you don't reject the possibility of miracles.
Yeah, because I think that existence is a miracle. The fact that anything exists, yeah.
And you're open to the idea of a first mover, correct? You said
I am open-minded to it. It doesn't mean that I am a deistic. It just means I lean towards it.
Sure. So you agree then that reality could, in principle, contain an act beyond natural causation, yes?
I am open-minded to that.
Fantastic. So if you accept miracles in principle, Why would the resurrection, right, the single most consistent with the first movers entry into contingency, be excluded?
Because when I read the Gospels, it doesn't seem like truth is being prioritized. It seems that theology is being prioritized, and then I just have to follow the evidence where it leads.
Yeah,
And to me,
that's just a bias towards historical methodology. That's all. That's fine. So,
you could
if
say
I'm
that if
reclaiming my
you.
time,
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah.
isn't your skepticism here less about the miracles themselves, and then, like you said, more about the particular historical case?
Can you say that one more time?
Your skepticism here is less about miracles themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right, and more about the particular historical case.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you've mentioned a lack of eyewitness accounts, but would you agree that in principle a minimal number of witnesses can still confirm truth, even if the event itself is necessary?
Sure.
Fantastic. And but the thing is, like you said, the texts are unreliable. Isn't it true that testimony is always interpreted against priors? Like, for instance, if you believe miracles are possible, wouldn't you interpret the same evidence differently than if you deny them?
I wouldn't say differently. I maintain a principle of consistency that I treat different things the same way, and it's can I build a probabilistic case that demonstrates it's more so that it happened or less so that it did, and so I treat other religions the same way.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, you mentioned like the minimal witness hypothesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even if minimal testimony exists, doesn't that align precisely with what we'd expect if the event were already metaphysically necessary?
Well, when you say metaphysically necessary, I like to think that if you can make the argument one way, then there's no problem with working backwards to the modal argument that you present. Meaning, if I can demonstrate the historicity of it, then I should work back to the modal argument you gave and the necessity of the resurrection. But unfortunately, although I can be like you and start with the modal argument and work my way down, I'd be granting too much, because then when I try to work backwards from the historical argument, it just doesn't seem to hold up.
Yeah, but it seems that you're while you say you're working in a particular direction, you're actually working in reverse.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yes,
So you're starting with the top and trying to work your way back instead of starting with the bottom and working your way out.
yeah, and I like to look at both. Like your modal argument is sound theology, I will say. But again, if I'm just looking at theology, I feel like I wouldn't be the historical method. I would just throw out the window then, and I feel like the historical method is important.
Well, sure, historical methods are important, but also identifying the correct historical methodology being employed is equally important. Wouldn't you say that?
Um, yes, I suppose.
So if the text itself is similar in the style of historical methodology of the time, in comparison to something modern like a Marxist view of historical methodology, why would you expect that methodology to be employed when it didn't even exist yet?
Well, I mean, that it didn't exist yet isn't an issue to me. I mean, if truth is objective, and if God is the objective grounding of truth, then it doesn't matter that I employ a more modern standard or critique to it. I think the fact that we are moving to a closer objective, and maybe it is God, the source of all objective truth, then I have every right to apply modern standards to that, especially if I'm just applying the historical method. It's not like we're having a moral discussion, I don't think.
Yeah, but placing unrealistic expectations towards the text is removing it from its historical actual perspective and the methodology being employed.
I can
It's
appreciate.
not treating the text in a coherent way.
Time.
Is it? He has 5 seconds.
Yep. All right.
Oh, I see.
Time's up.
Yep.
Okay.
So now, Joey, you get 5 minutes for your cross.
Sure. I guess because I don't want us to just talk past each other, I do want to engage a little bit with the modal argument that you gave. You and I both agree that perhaps there is a God and perhaps miracles exist. We've cleared that up. But I guess my next question is, what about the necessity of the event can you demonstrate to be true? Like, for example, you say that this necessarily needs to happen because God or Jesus' resurrection is the only way to heal sort of like the broken fractures in reality. Can you explain what that means and why we should believe that's true?
It's entailed by the distinction between necessity and contingency. So contingency is it could have been another way, in which necessity is it could not be the way that it is. So if the necessary instantiates within contingency, it cannot be subsumed in totality by contingency. It wouldn't be necessary.
Okay. Well, I understand what you mean, but wouldn't you agree that this is kind of like a puddle analogy? It's just sort of like something happened, and now we're trying to make it fit a certain pattern of theology. I think we're trying to make sense of it. That's what I feel the modal argument is. We're trying to make sense of why a resurrection needed to happen when, in reality, if someone died and someone else had a vision of the person who died, I can explain it naturalistically. I don't need to come up with, oh, well, then why did this person appear to me, right? Don't you think that this is better explained in that sense?
I guess possibly. My only contention is that like pushing a narrative of like personal, subjective, like internal experiences that we call visions, that there is some actual coherence between all of these subjective experiences is like, especially when it isn't expected, is really hard to push for me.
Okay. Can you go into what you mean by structural healing? Like, why is the resurrection the only way? I don't even know if you're arguing that it's the only way, but why do you think that the nature of reality needs healing? I understand that in Christianity there's sin, but can you expound more on that healing part?
Sure. So, like within my worldview, knowledge is instantiative, which means that it has form. Form is required to interact. And so, when it comes to like goodness or evil, truth or falsehood, like you can present a falsehood about something, and that statement is non-substantive. It's something we would all say, like that doesn't have any substance.
Okay.
Um,
Just really quick, would you agree that saying that the resurrection, would you agree that the resurrection doesn't necessarily prove ontology? Like, don't you think you're kind of jumping the gun there a bit, and that what's more important is the historical claim, not so much a logical or structural or philosophical explanation? Like, in order to even build the philosophical explanation, you have to engage with the historical claims first.
Sure, but we also have to be epistemically humble, right? We have to understand that our observation of an event does not necessarily align to the actuality of the event, right? We have our own expectations, our own biases that we bring in. And so when we apply a metaphysical structure or a metaphysical basis to those claims, we're saying that it must comport with these things to be true.
Okay.
It's not just contingently true because
I want to ask, why the crucifixion? Like, you hold the crucifixion to such high value.
Yeah, as I said before,
isn't the crucifixion more likely, like in terms of literal terms, just a barbaric way the Romans, kept people in check? That now we've turned such a barbaric practice that's no longer used, and we've risen, Christians have risen it up to this necessity, the way that you do in the modal argument. Wouldn't you say that that's not just a stretch, but kind of really doing everything a Christian can to sort of make this seem like this not only had to happen, but it's the only way that it happened? Don't you think that's a bit far-fetched?
I don't think so, right? Like when we are experiencing life, we know the difference between, like, we can intuitively know disjunction. So the way things are and the way they are in opposition to it, or in its negation, to be or not be a thing. Okay. And so to not be aligned with being itself, that's what makes.
Okay. I just want to say I wanted to use my first cross-examination to be fair to you and make sure that I give your modal argument, a chance. And so I questioned it. And so for the next few question things, I will be attacking more using the historical arguments that I made.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that's time. Okay, second round. Heirophant, we'll start your timer whenever you say your first word.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems that you're saying that there are sufficient naturalistic explanations towards how this idea of the resurrection would emerge, or even the implication of the resurrection being an actual event. Um, but we see evidence, especially within like early creedal stances of Christianity, within like the first 3 to 5 years of Jesus's death, reported resurrection and ascension, that Jesus was crucified, died, buried, and was resurrected according to the scriptures. How do you explain the totality of moving parts that would be required to make this like fallacious?
To me, it's not as big a deal because again, I apply a principle of consistency to other religious claims, and I look at the way a religion grows. All it takes is one person to claim to have seen something, and their sincerity, whether they're being fooled, whether they're trying to deceive or not, is enough to convince other people. And whether someone passes away or someone is experiencing grief, people have dreams or visions or see things. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm arguing for a group hallucination. I don't think that's it. I think that if you just start with someone like Paul or even Mary Magdalene, that's all you need. Maybe, perhaps not even Paul, Peter, right? Someone after Jesus' death
Okay.
truly was
Yeah, sure,
distraught,
sure, sure.
and that was enough to help, was the catalyst to get the religion to grow.
So, I mean, one quick question, the immediate one, is one of the immediate responses was a Jewish polemic that emerged in response to the resurrection claims, which is that the disciples stole the body. But this presupposes that Jesus existed and was crucified. How do you
Yeah, I have no
reconcile
issue
that?
with the idea that Jesus necessarily was crucified. I don't know anything about the body. I don't know anything about the tomb. I think Joseph. I'm with Bart Ehrman, who thinks that the Joseph of Arimathea was added as sort of a way to explain what happened to the body. I don't know if there was a that's irrelevant to my argument. I just think that again, whether there was a tomb or not, empty or not, it's still better. The data still better explains that visions and a small number of people thinking they saw something is all it takes for the belief in the resurrection to spread.
It's, I mean, you're going to have to give me some more than just anecdotal claims towards like this is more likely, because
Okay.
you're talking about like conspiracy in some fashion, and then this global game of telephone. But we have, I mean, we can appeal to tradition. I'm not even Eastern Orthodox, and Eastern Orthodoxy has maintained a time honored tradition for over 1,500 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
like it's this idea
Tradition.
that it was like this cosmic game of telephone, or like these guys were playing telephone at first.
Yeah, well, the embellishments demonstrate that there's some telephone happening. The fact that you go from Mark's
No, the
gospel.
embellishments are indicative of the historical methodology being employed.
I don't know
Those
about a
great men of
methodology. It
history,
doesn't seem like they're prioritizing historical accuracy.
because the methodology is great men of history. In the
Say that
same
again?
way that we said that George Washington had wooden teeth and chopped down a cherry tree and said, "I cannot tell a lie." These are embellishments on the methodology that was being employed for the historical recollection, right? And so it's not going to match what we would apply in modernity.
No, but I'm sorry, I have to push back here. If my eternal soul rests on understanding what is true about the resurrection, then I am the fact that I am questioning the embellishments as evidence that this is a legend growing over time. I think I'm justified in rejecting the resurrection as a probable thing because again, I'm trying to bet my life on it, and I just can't.
The legend over time, you'd have to explain the explosion of Christianity within the first 50 years. That
Hmm.
that doesn't meet the legends take ridiculous amounts of time to establish themselves.
No, I mean, like 50 years is still a long time. Like, sure, but the fact that Mormonism only happened in the 1800s and they're 17
Yeah, we
million
have
strong today.
pagan.
Yeah, the
Anger
fact that
wasn't invented
Islam is
until
going to surpass
300.
Christianity in the number of followers.
Time. All right. So we're going to Joey's cross, and we'll start your timer whenever you say first word.
Yeah. What do you think of the fact that it's not likely that the story of Jesus' birth narrative with Herod the Great slaughtering innocent newborns is actually a historical event, or that it's such a low probability that most biblical scholars don't accept it as something that is historically true? It seems more that Matthew's author, whether it was Matthew or not, was prioritizing again the embellishment to try and make Jesus appear as the new Moses who is fulfilling the old covenant with a new one. And so he's drawing on parallels to Moses, sort of like the newborn, the firstborns that were taken with, the blood of the lamb over the doors, with Pharaoh causing them to flee Egypt, stuff like that. Would you not say that the fact that, once again, historical accuracy is not being prioritized, but embellishment in order to fit a theological narrative seems to demonstrate the resurrection probably didn't happen?
We see it in similar texts from the time period of narrative embellishments meant to set the scene for an event. And so what's not in contention is the extras surrounding the event, but whether or not the event itself actually occurred. And the birth of Christ happened.
Sure. But, can we agree, though, that the likelihood of the slaughter of innocent newborns is just not historical?
I don't have a position to hold on that.
Okay, that's fair.
To be honest.
That's fair.
Like an absence of evidence is not an affirmation of its negation.
Sure, but
as
when you're
much
building,
as it stands as like an
yeah, absolutely.
affirmation
But
of
if you're
its
trying to build a probabilistic case, then the silence is deafening. The silence is the evidence I can use to build my probability case, and so that's why I agree. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but it can still be used to create your probabilistic case of the likelihood of the event. So I guess my next question is, with the resurrection, notice that the doubting Thomas story, and even Lazarus being raised from the dead, and the Gospel of John seems to be the one that really goes out there, and it makes the most sense because it's the latest gospel written. It has the most embellishment. It has the most extra stories not mentioned by the others. Would you not agree that like the likelihood of the stories in the Gospel of John, again, probably are later embellishments, didn't actually happen, and that the doubting Thomas story perhaps was just put in there to address actual doubters?
I think that the Thomas narrative was put in there to address the lack of expectation in a physical, individualistic resurrection. At the time, especially in Jewish thought, there was this idea of resurrection, but it was like in an eschatological sense. In the end of the world, all is made right, all is made new. And so they had this concept of resurrection, but it wouldn't have been an expectation. And so the doubts of Thomas are valid. And that's why they would be included.
Okay. Did you hear my example that I gave? If I meet someone who sometimes tells me things that are true, sometimes tells me things that are false, and sometimes tells me things that I'm never certain of, that I'm justified in not trusting this person with my life? I know I said that to you. Did you hear that before?
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah. Would you not agree that I'm fair to apply the principle of consistency to the Bible? Unfortunately, I'm hearing some things that are true, some things that are not true, and some things I can just never verify, whether they're embellished for theological reasons or to spread the gospel message. Would you not agree that I'm justified in rejecting the resurrection and the claims of Jesus' life during and after?
Do you follow social norms?
Can you say that again?
You follow social norms?
What do you mean?
Do you behave in a manner that is befitting social normativity in praxis?
I guess.
Do you trust your life with it?
Yeah.
Is it wrong sometimes?
Sure.
All right, then.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah. I don't know if I have any more questions beyond that because I know we have one more round. So yeah, I'll yield my time here.
All right.
I do want to say, Joey, this has been thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah, you too, man.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll give you your 5 minutes.
Yeah, this is part of my 5 minutes. I'm like using my time.
Go ahead.
It's okay. Sorry, I apologize. I thought the timer started when we started talking.
No. Go ahead.
So, would you agree that your position tonight is not that the resurrection is impossible, but only that you remain unconvinced by the historical record?
That the historical record makes it that the resurrection has a very low probability or likelihood.
I mean, I guess then my real question is, like, does the structure of reality require such an event? And I think that's exactly what my argument has shown,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Are you
And
asking me?
from that structure, the historical any like explanation regarding its methodology is irrelevant. That affirms the explanation that exists underneath these particular claims. I think makes the argument.
Is
And
there a
so
question in here?
I
Sorry, I
guess
don't know
one of
what
my
you're asking.
last questions is why the hesitancy, right? We've shown that you asked a question like, why, if something's wrong sometimes, why would I trust my life with it? And we said that there are similar things that you trust your life with. So
Mm-hmm.
what's the hesitation?
I yearn for truth, and perhaps it's instilled on me by a creator. I truly want to know if there is a God, and I truly want to know this God. And so I think I have to hold myself to a high standard. I can't just accept the claims of a religion merely because it might fit some modal argument or because people sincerely were willing to die for these beliefs. I have to hold a high standard. If I am betting my eternal soul, if I am giving my life to this God, I want to know truth. I yearn for truth. And if this God is the source of all truth and knowledge, then anytime I reject a religious claim like the resurrection, I am not moving away from God. I am moving closer towards God. That's my philosophy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I will concede my time. I really don't have any more questions for you, my man.
Sure.
All right, Joey, you get 5 minutes.
All right. I don't know if I can ask us that many questions. I feel like I've asked many things, but um, I've gone over the reliability of the Bible. I guess eyewitness testimony. My issue, and part of the argument is I don't know who really counts as an eyewitness. I don't. Mark is writing for Peter, who's supposedly an eyewitness. So again, we're once removed. Paul wasn't there for any of the event. He had a vision, which again points more towards my argument that someone had a vision and sincerely believed, and that's how the faith started to grow with other believing the sincerities of this. So I guess would you not agree that this lack of eyewitness testimony is very damning for the resurrection?
Not, not necessarily. I don't put the a weight of importance on eyewitness testimony. Like, I admit that the authorship of the Gospels are anonymous, right? Words, the referent of a word exists, and so who wrote the words is irrelevant to me. It's whether or not they resonate with my metaphysical commitments.
Okay. So in terms of the resurrection, would you not agree, going back to your modal argument, there are worst ways. Like Jesus didn't go through the worst thing. It's horrible what he went through, getting crucified. That's torture. But there are people who have suffered even more in this world. Isn't it weird to put so much weight on an event that what Jesus went through when it's not even the worst thing a person can go through or has gone through in history? There are people who have suffered more than Jesus in this world.
I mean, we invented a word from the type of suffering that Jesus endured on the cross. That's how severe it was. That was how disjunctive it was. To say that someone has experienced something more than excruciating, what's the word?
I mean, it's not even a word that I need. It's just if I describe the things, if there's a combination of psychological, emotional, and physical suffering, right? There are, and again, I'm trying not to be too descriptive because I don't want to like give this live problems.
Sure.
But we know of stories of girls who are kidnapped at a very young age, and their abuser for many years holds them down in a basement, essays them, and how they pray over and over and nothing happens. No one saves them. They have to bear the child of their their abuser, their kidnapper. They're beaten, they're hit, and sometimes they're even left for dead. And I think, yes, what Jesus went through is horrible, but again, when you combine these things with the suffering that other people went through, emotional suffering, physical suffering, psychological suffering, there are things that people have gone through that seem to be, when you read about them, much worse than what Jesus went through. So
Seem.
yeah.
And I don't want to sound heartless, right?
Yeah.
Because like when I hear, like, as a pastor, I've experienced having to talk to individuals who weren't in those exact circumstances, but somewhat similar ones. And like there are no words. To think that there are words to provide, they don't exist.
I don't know, like I don't know that the word excruciating necessarily came from that. I'm sure
From that,
something
and so
excruciating
when we
happened. I don't know if it's
use
the original source.
when we
Anyway,
use
I'm going to go ahead and yield my time. I don't have anything else to ask. I think we've said what we needed to say.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And that would conclude the cross examinations. And then, Tim, you can start your closer whenever you say your first word.
ladies and gentlemen, let's remember who my opponent is. While not an atheist, he is one who admits that does not reject miracles, not even a first mover. He is, by his own words, open. And yet, when confronted with the resurrection, he retreats into agnosticism. But agnosticism is not neutral. It accepts the possibilities of miracles in theory, while refusing the one miracle that necessity itself demands. That is not consistency. That is hesitation. Yes, he questions eyewitnesses. He calls the texts unreliable. He cites the minimal witness hypothesis. But notice what he's not done. He has not shown how contingency alone explains reality, nor why the resurrection is unnecessary. He has only casted doubt. My argument has been different. It begins with priors forced on us all: necessity, disjunction, coherence. From these priors, the resurrection is no longer an accident. It's not just a story, but the inevitable act of the Logos entering maximal fracture and overcoming it. That's why even minimal testimony is enough, because it confirms what must be. So the question tonight is not whether the texts persuade you on their own, it's whether reality holds itself together. Without the resurrection, contingency collapses into incoherence. With it, necessity secures all being. Jesus Christ rose from the dead, not improbable, not optional, but the necessary victory over being and non-being. Thank you.
Okay, that'll conclude Tim's closer. Now, Joey, we'll start whenever you say your first word.
Thank you. So I appreciate Hierophant. Thank you again to the hosts for this tournament. I've really enjoyed the discussion and debate. Again, let me reiterate, like I said in the beginning, and just like my opponent stated again, I am an agnostic who is very open-minded to the possibility of a creator or God. I think, again, existence itself is the greatest miracle, and so I remain open-minded to the possibility of a God. And it's not that I'm hesitating or anything, it's that my heart truly desires truth. And perhaps this is something instilled in me by my Creator, if a Creator exists. I yearn and desire to know truth and be in truth. And so this is the key. Being open to the possibility of God and miracles does not mean we just accept every miracle claim that comes our way. And that's the thing. We hold ourselves to a higher standard. We question, doubt, and move as close to truth as possible when we're exploring things like the resurrection and God. So I think I'm very well justified in either my agnosticism and my lack of belief in the resurrection when I say these things. After all, it seems again that the historical claim of the resurrection is a very low probability. And again, what do the facts show that I've mentioned? Jesus died around 30 to 36. Not a single historian or Roman person recorded what happens during his lifetime and his miracles, his supposed large gatherings of groups when he fed the 5,000 with loaves of bread and fish, stuff like that. And again, it's not until we get to the year 50 that we get Paul, who wasn't even there, who starts writing the letters of things that happen, and then we see embellishments with the Gospel of John. So over time, embellishment is happening, and I think looking at the pattern of how things came to be in the Bible justifies me in saying what is more likely, that what is being written down is historical and accurate and true, or that things are being added over time, that we don't have any eyewitness testimony, and that I have the right to be skeptical of the resurrection being something true, especially when it can be explained through other means, including the minimal witness hypothesis, where all you need is someone to have an experience of a vision, just like what Paul had. And you can go earlier to Peter if you want, or Mary Magdalene, but all it's saying is that you don't need a large group of people seeing something. And remember, it would just become embellished from there, because then Paul mentions the 500, something we don't have any evidence of, no testimony of, nothing written of these things. And so I really think this was just a vision, and it wasn't a group hallucination. Again, I think the sincerity of one or two people was enough to get the ball rolling, the same way Mormonism grew, the same way other religions and cults do as well. Again, the gospel writers, I don't think they were neutral reporters. They clearly had an agenda, and they wrote the way they wrote things makes sense to that, with Herod the Great and the slaughter of the innocents. And remember my analogy, you're justified in doubting someone or even the Bible if they tell you things that are true, false, and things you can't verify. So I stand on what I said. I remain open to God, but I reject the resurrection. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes the debate. So, do we want audience first or judges?
I don't care. It doesn't matter to me.
Are the judges ready?
I don't care.
If the
You guys
judges,
ready, judges?
I don't care which one we do first.
Oh yeah, we should probably
Maybe
do the
ask the
judges.
audience what we should do
Okay.
first.
judges first.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna give my judgment and then give my reasoning. This goes to Joey, and pretty handily. I will though say that Hierophant had better rhetoric throughout the whole debate, but Joey overall met his burden, which is like basically a lack thereof. He pointed out the lack of historicity in the claim of Jesus Christ resurrected, and there was no historical backing to Jesus Christ resurrecting by Hierophant. However, I also do want to point out, as a judge, Hierophant was question begging this whole debate, which is, even if we grant him that the resurrection is necessary metaphysically, that doesn't provide any credence to the claim that Jesus Christ was who was resurrected, or necessarily that the resurrection has happened in the past, and it won't happen in the future, or something along those lines. So the fact that you assume it's Jesus Christ would have to be informed by some historical backing, which you did not provide. So because you did not provide the historical backing to the claim, Rivers wins the debate pretty handily. Good job to both interlocutors. This was way more handleable. Like, I can handle this a lot better than the first debate. It wasn't as much of a headache. So good job.
Thank you.
Okay. I actually thought this was somewhat close. So there were two main purposes. One is this kind of modal argument that Heirophant was giving, and the other is the kind of historical analysis. And just personally, I will say that I'm not a fan of the argument that Heirophant was giving, but I don't think that Joey did a good job responding to it for the most part. He brought up a couple of concerns, but I don't think he did well to get to the heart of the issue on that argument. So I think on that point, Heirophant came out better, I think, on that argument. But on the historical stuff and the what the plausible explanations are for the data that we have regarding the testimony and so on, I thought that Joey came out ahead. So overall, to me, it was kind of close. I think I would give it to Joey just slightly, but pretty close.
All right. I also thought this was a close debate. I thought both debaters did well. I really appreciated how respectful both of you were and how nice to each other were. That's nice. Love it. I think Heirophant did much better on the modal argument than Joey did. And Joey did a little bit of pushback, but I would have liked to see much more engagement from you, Joey, on the argument. Like, for example, our other great judge pointed out like 2 easy things you could have done. Like, why does it need to be Jesus that's resurrected? Why does it need to be at the time that it is? So you could have granted his conclusion that, some resurrection was necessary, but not the particular one that you're debating. And, his argument would just have done nothing. And then you could have done the type of historical argument that you gave, and that'd be convincing. But I do think on that point, on the historical point, you definitely won that point. I think there needed to be more pushback from Heirophant on that point, and I think you needed to better engage with the minimal hypothesis. I think it's difficult to judge exactly who won the debate. It doesn't really matter because even if I voted for Heirophant, it'd be 2-1. So I think I'll give it to Joey. And the reason why is because I don't think the first argument even concludes that the particular resurrection that you're discussing is necessary. So I think the argument needed to be articulated more. And then the one argument that did concern Jesus Christ's particular resurrection, I think Joey won on that with the minimal witness hypothesis. So, yeah.
Okay, congratulations, Joey. And thank you, Tim and Joey.
Thank you
For participating.
Heirophant, the GOAT, Joey.
Yeah, wow. W to you two both, yo. This is great. This is close, man.
It was.
This was a good debate. I really enjoyed how cordial everyone was.
Heirophant's rhetoric is low key, like he's getting up there, bro. I'm like listening to him. I'm like, okay, like right. Even the vernacular, like he's getting that up there.
yeah, he is.
I do want to say, Heirophant. I always tell people, like people ask me, would I ever return to Christianity? What would that look like? The approach you take is an approach I would look at. I think a philosophical argument for the necessity of God is something that would bring me back to Christianity. If I did go back to Christianity, I would use your modal argument as part of my basis, I think. So I really do mean that.
Precepts King.
Oh, thanks.
Like when I finish writing it, I'll send it to you.
Oh, thanks. That doesn't mean I'm going back to Christianity. I'm just saying if I ever do. I just think there are better logical arguments for Christianity or believing in the Christian God. What you presented to me is one of those, I think, even though I'm sort of hearing it for the first time.
All right.
Time for the next debate.
Oh, we don't have time for
nice to each other.
Do you have time for
Dude, let's get on with it, bro. It's been long enough. It's 10 o'clock. Let's get this shit over with.
Oh,
okay.
Listen, the great Cage demands it, so we must.
All right. Can do that.
Oh, I've been Ubering for 7 hours. I'm tired of it. Let's go.
He's tired, guys. I'm ready to hear the debate.
Well, let's get Mob.
Yeah, we need Mob.
I'm ready for the meta-ethical debate of the century.
I'm subbing in for Mob. Cage, motivate, not air 3. No, I'm kidding.
This shit is going on YouTube. It's gonna be great.
I'm kidding. Save it for the debate.